Hello, you're listening to the award-winning East Africa Travel Podcast. Today we get stuck back into my conversation with Malcolm Wilson, who's a legend in the birding world, particularly in Uganda and South Africa. Last week we sat around the ringing table at Sunbird Hill on the edge of Kibale Forest. We explored the science behind bird ringing and celebrate how birds are returning to this rewilding site on the edge of the forest. I can't believe it. Shining blue kingfishers. Not one, not two, but three. I've only ever seen one, and it was just a flash of blue, and this time I get a chance to see it up close. It's a dazzling bird with a lethal-looking beak like a spear. The giveaway that it uses it to catch fish. And of course, that's why it's round our pond. But today we look back, almost 50 years in fact, to Malcolm's first travels by bike across Europe, the Middle East, down towards Africa. If you missed episode 33, don't worry, it makes just as much sense if you listen to it after you've listened to this one, but I guarantee you're going to learn a lot. Malcolm has had some hair-raising adventures. This is what I call real travel. From drinking tea in the office of the Sudanese ambassador to riding on trucks across the Central African Republic. Kids in remote African villages who've never seen a white man before. Sleeping with an axe under his pillow at one point in his travels. Working self-funded in Queen Elizabeth National Park to massively increase the number of birds for the National Park's bird list. Witnessing hilarious scenes such as a donkey being thrown in the air in jubilation. Where does this all happen? Tune in. Enjoy the ride. My name is Charlotte Beauvoisin and you're listening to the East Africa Travel Podcast by Diary of a Muzungu. And if you enjoy this episode, please make sure you're following us on Apple or Spotify or any other podcast directory. I'd love to know what you think about this episode. Please write a review or send us a direct message. What first brought you to Uganda?
I had travelled in southern Africa in the late 70s, early 80s and had ridden...
You did an epic bike ride, is that the same trip?
Yeah, that was... So I first went to Africa, to South Africa in 79, Zimbabwe, Botswana, Zambia, Namibia, and then I went back to the UK and then I came back again. I rode a bike from across the channel and tried my luck at hitching, and back then in France trying to get a lift, pretty hopeless. So I ended up making my way to Holland and finding an old friend there who hooked me up with a bike. We found an old bike in a scrapyard. It was a Dutch Gazelle. It was made in 1927 and I bought it for like 10 guilders, something like that.
Did it have any gears?
No.
Oh,
No gears. It was the old back brake and it had a great old leather saddle, but it had no tyres on it, and they didn't make tyres then that fitted the rims. So I took it to an old Turkish bicycle shop, and I'll never forget the name of the guy. His name was Bozo Laguz, the Turkish bicycle shop man, and he respoked it and put new rims on it, and then subsequently tyres that fitted those rims. And I set off on that bike not knowing at all how far I would get, and just living in woodlands and forests and farms and knocking on farmers' doors and getting put up in the barn. If I was lucky, they'd put me up in a spare room or sofa or garage. Or
did you have a destination in mind?
No, I was just going south. I just thought, let me go down to Greece. That seems like a good place to head for. So I cycled down through Europe. Austria, I ended up in Austria where I had a girlfriend that was working in London, so I hooked up with her and ended up working in a boatyard there for a few months, made a bit of pocket money, and then carried on south down through then Yugoslavia.
And you are 24, is that right?
24, yes. I got to Greece and I'd lived in Europe in a camper van for a year, and I went back into this campsite that we'd stayed at for some time and had a huge amount of fun, parties, and I pulled in there and said, can I sleep on the beach? And if you want me to do anything, I'll work for you. And the owner there said, yeah, sure, you can come work in the kitchen. It was great. I loved it. I was doing the Greek salads, peeling the onions, potatoes, helping out in the kitchen and waiting tables. And I was a bit of a novelty for them there because he was quite proud that they had this English waiter. And ended up got really close to the owner, who then took me on as his minder. He dressed me up in these sort of outrageous clothes. I remember, no, you have to wear this. And driving him around in his Mercedes.
What do you mean outrageous clothes?
Well,
give us an image.
I mean, the first time I ever put on, what's the thing with the little crocodile on it?
Lacoste.
Lacoste. Like a t-shirt, and these fancy jeans and these like crocodile skin shoes, and I had to shave and have a haircut and clean, and I looked quite the slick sort of minder for a Greek tycoon, or a Greek businessman anyway. We used to drive into Athens, and I used to wear these shades and look menacing, and because I was 3 foot taller than anyone else around me, it was it made quite an effect, and he loved it, and we had a great fun doing that. That went on for some time, and then the lure of the road caught up with me, and I carried on. Not before he said, you got to come to South Africa because I have work for you there.
Okay.
And I also went to the Peloponnese to his wedding. We spent 3 days in the Peloponnese, and he married his wife then. She was very pregnant. I was a guest at his wedding, which was very nice. That was a proper Greek wedding up in the mountains in this little village where he was born, all his family. Remarkable experience. It never happened because he went to South Africa where he had a business. He wanted me to go and help him in that business. Him and his newly pregnant wife got hit by a truck, got killed. Terrible business. That was the end of that. So anyway, these things happen, but it was kind of carried on with a bike, Greece, and I went through Turkey, Middle East, down through Egypt, down the Nile, into Sudan. And yeah, you said I was 24 at the time, because cycling down the Nile was a wonderful experience.
Any language skills apart from English?
Bit of French. Don't know why, but I liked Arabic, and I started to pick that up quite well. My Greek was all right at the time. I could get by. Picked up sort of German, Greek and Arabic, really. Those are the 3 languages that I could sort of muddle along with enough to be understood. Grammatically probably shocking, but it's always so nice to be in remote areas on a bicycle and just greet people, and you always know the first thing you'll hear, and that where have you come from? And where are you going? And that's always something that you learn. And the people you discover wherever you go in the world, there's sort of small remote little places, and you turn up as a complete stranger on a bicycle. People are always so hospitable. They will always help you. That's something you learn in life, that all people are good. Just a few rotten apples that make it so bad for everyone else. And I just had the most wonderful experience in the countries that I've cycled through, particularly Sudan, because Sudan was a special experience for me. I just have nothing but good to say about the people of Sudan, how wonderfully hospitable they were to me, and how they helped me and wanted nothing from me at all. That really was an eye-opener for me. And to see now how people treat Sudanese who are desperate and want to come to England, and all they want to do is have another chance because it's just so desperate back from where they come from, and they're just treated abominably, really.
I've heard it time and time again. I was talking to a biker last week who has just been through 30 African countries, and he says exactly the same. And I've spoken to other people as well, is that it's almost unheard of to have anything negative happen. Everybody's curious, and everybody's welcoming.
The thing I remember, some of the negative things I remember was whenever you were in a big city, because that's where that's where all the trouble was. I remember being in a park somewhere in Europe and just fast asleep behind a flower bed somewhere. I thought it was got my bike next to me, being woken up with a big kick in the back, and there was 3 or 4 skinheads there to give me your money. And in situations like that, there's nothing you can do. There's no police. I was very fond of this rather long throwing axe I had that was quite sharp, and A farmer had given it to me, and it was a very old piece of equipment. Some farmer in a village I'd stayed in his farm, and he said, here, presented me with this axe, which was a real, never forgotten it. It was a wonderful piece of kit, and I just got up, whipped this axe out. It was under my pillow, and I just stood there and had this axe, and these skinheads went, oh, maybe not, and they all legged it.
So you didn't have to use it.
Well, that villager didn't intend it for, but he gave me an axe and it worked, and it was all fine. I certainly defended myself. But anyway, that's only happens in cities, and when you got
and that was in Europe as well, wasn't it?
I saw some terrible things in Africa, but it was either political or driven by dire situations, dire circumstances.
And so, back in the day, this was Sudan, this was one country.
Yeah, you said, at 24, I didn't realise at the time I was queuing up in this terrible, very tense environment, trying to get my passport stamped with my visa in it, which was an incredibly difficult thing to do. But thanks to a family of Sudanese that I'd met in Cairo, who fast-tracked my application at the Sudanese embassy, which would have taken months. They knew the ambassador, and I actually went in and sat down in the office of the ambassador with this friend I'd made in Cairo, and he said, where's your passport? He called in his clerk, and the clerk went off. We had a cup of tea, had a chat. Clerk came back with my visa and the passport, and that was it. And there was a crowd 100 thick outside, all queuing to get their visas. Incredibly lucky. So that was going into Sudan in this little immigration hut with this soldier with it's pitch black, and he's wearing sunglasses, and I could hardly see anything, and he demanded my passport, and I'm sitting there thinking he could quite easily just kick me out and tell me to go back into Egypt. And this is at the end of a long steamer ride down the Lake Aswan, from the Aswan Dam. He just looked at me, and I thought, here it comes. He said, many happy returns. And I just couldn't understand why he would say such. Oh, and then suddenly realised it's my birthday. It's March 11th. I was 25. I had no idea. And then I went on my bike, and that was when I cycled across the railway in the night. The day it was 50 something degrees. So I used to sleep under my sheet. I had this sheet I'd bought in a market, and I'd try and sleep as best I could in the day. It was like 2.5 days. I cycled along a railway line at night under the moon. It was cool. I'd cycle all night, and as the sun came up, as it got too hot, I'd just park up somewhere and just lie under my sheet until the sun went down again, and then got on my bike and just cycled through the night. Quite scary actually, but managed to do it, and had just enough water to get through, and hyenas running alongside you in a full moon, just
whoa,
waiting
amazing.
for you to fall off or have an accident. Just always there.
Did you have a light
there.
on your bike?
No.
No.
Yeah, that was fun. And then
Did you get as far as Uganda on that trip?
no, at the time it was a coup. Nimeri had gone to Egypt, I think, to a dental appointment in Cairo, and that was a time they decided this is a good opportunity to stage a coup d'etat. I happened to be in Khartoum at the time, which was quite scary. After all this terrible fighting and stressful few days, Nimeri was deposed, and the transitional government had now taken control of Sudan, and it was the end of Sharia law, more importantly, and that's what people wanted, and it was just jubilation. I just remember this one scene of a crowd of people who were so happy. They picked up this donkey and were throwing it in the air. Like the donkey didn't think much of this, but it was nonetheless, it was a source of their jubilation to throw this donkey up and down in the air. Yeah,
God,
again,
what an image.
Sudan was just an incredible place. I loved it. I loved the people, everything about it.
Did you spend long there?
Probably getting on for a year.
Okay.
Yeah, just living with, I called him my Uncle Ali, and Haida Ismail was my friend, and we travelled and hung out. And
Did you go birding?
yeah, I remember I saw my first black-headed gonolek there. And Egyptian plovers on the Nile.
Any shoebill?
No, not up there, but travelled to the Red Sea. And then from that point on, I thought I've had enough of the bicycle. So I padlocked it in Ali's garage. He had a Model T Ford. And I thought it quite fitting that I padlocked this Dutch Gazelle to this Model T Ford and left it there. It's quite a wrench, having been on that bike for so long throughout Europe and the Middle East and North Africa. And from then on it was just trains and trucks, and often regretted not carrying on the bike. The independence you have on a bike is so important. And then eventually, got all the way down to Central Africa.
So, Zaire.
Zaire.
Yeah.
That's right. So I ended up going through Central African Republic. One of the most harrowing experiences was leaving Khartoum on a train bound for the southwest corner of Sudan, Kassala. We took the train towards Central African Republic with the idea of going into CAR and Bangui to continue on to the west. This train left Khartoum, and the only space available on this train was on the roof. There was no room, it was just full of people. Maybe 4,000 people in the train, maybe 2,000 people on the roof. Just crowds. I mean, I think we've all seen pictures of. So I climbed up and sat on this roof of this train, and we finally left. And it's 50 degrees in the shade. It's just roasting hot, sitting on my sleeping bag. And I befriended this school teacher, El Taib, never forget his name. And we chatted away and we carried on. We'd stop periodically in places where we could get off and get some tea and some fool and beans, just local fare, and then get back up onto the roof. Needless to say, there wasn't any sort of toilet compartment on the roof, so you passed the can backwards and forwards. That was your toilet. And just travelling through the night, freezing cold, and everyone just crowded together like spoons. Everyone was just spooning everyone else. I remember I just flip-flops and shorts. I can always remember how cold my legs were, and a t-shirt, and thankfully I'd always kept a big Nile jumper that my mum had knitted me when I was a kid. I still had it with me, a wonderful old jumper. And then that 20-minute period in the morning as the sun came up, that blissful warmth until it just got unbearably hot, and then it went up to 50, 55 degrees again, and you just sat there with a sheet over you, just trying not to think of anything. And then the train gets derailed in the middle of the desert, absolutely in the middle of nowhere, hundreds of kilometres from anywhere, just nothing but nothing.
So no food, no water?
No water, nothing. The only time in my life, and I hope it'll never happen again, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone, is the feeling of chronic thirst. And I mean to the point where you cannot think of anything but you need water. You're that desperate for water. It's absolutely awful. I can't describe how awful it was, the feeling of being so thirsty, of not having had water for so long. And
how long was it since you'd drunk?
Well, it was the beginning of the day, and at the end of the day you're in a really bad way. And then through the night nothing, and they signalled for the boxcar to come the next day, and the boxcar came, and it was just an absolute riot. There's thousands of people
and everyone's in the same state.
Yeah, a lot of people died. A lot of people were murdered because people were stealing, trying to get water. A lot of knife fights broke out. First time I'd ever seen someone run through with a sword and hacked to death. I don't know how many people died. There was bodies. I remember the bodies just lying there, just left in the sand, and I'm just despairing, just watching all these metal boxes of water just being smashed, and all the water, just desperate people, no order, no control, and then the soldiers just whipping everyone, and eventually, and my school teacher, El Taib, he took my millets water bottle and he went off, and I just sat there on the top of the train thinking, this is it, I'm done for. I really did think that. I think if he doesn't come back, I'm actually done. I can't move. I'm in such a bad way. And it was hours later he came back. He was cut bruised, bleeding, and not in a good way. But he climbed back up, and he had my litre bottle of water full with this muddy brown water, and I just took it, and I remember thinking, I said, "Have you drunk?" And he said, "No, you must drink." So he'd got that for me and hadn't had a drink himself.
Amazing.
We drank that water bottle on top of the train and just recovered, really. But it was awful. I was very sick after that, very sick, when I got to Central African Republic. There.
How long after getting the water was the train moving? And
they brought the whole massive train of camels that pulled the train back onto the tracks. That's how they did it.
So that must have taken a lot of organising.
A lot, and then off we went again. We got to this town, just can't remember, I've gone blank. And I was really sick. I was staying at this place, and the guy was boiling baobab seeds and making me drink the water with the natural arsenic. Baobab seeds, like papaya seeds, have natural amounts of arsenic and amoebic dysentery. And he cured me. Amazing local medicine.
So the arsenic was a cure?
Killed all the bugs.
That was in the water that saved you?
So the arsenic kills off all the little amoebas.
Whoa, what story. Gosh, yeah, I bet you missed your bike right then.
Yeah, no, I think bugger the train. I'll take the bike next time. I learnt a lot about people there and what you do when you're in that situation. You're that desperate. Yeah.
How were you treated? I mean, you were looked after by the friend of yours, but I assume you were the only white person on the train.
Yeah.
You weren't treated particularly well or particularly badly? Or
no, it was a bit of a kind of looking after yourself. I just happened to befriend that old Taib, this English teacher, and we just chatted about stuff. He's quite well educated, going to see family down towards Central African Republic. And
so how long were you in CAR and what did you do there?
So I travelled through CAR, just travelling just to get from A to B. Trucks through shockingly bad roads, through the night, day and night, driving, just mile after mile, very slow progress, terrible roads, rainy season, getting stuck, and then suddenly finding a bridge has been washed away. Then it's just like weeks of waiting till they build the bridge, and then it would be a run, and who's going to drive across this makeshift bridge first, this raging torrent of a river. What they do is they take the entire cargo of the truck off and hand walk it across the bridge to the other side. Then the truck would just take this run up and like
fingers crossed,
and the bridge would collapse as it was crossing the river.
God.
And then the truck would either go into the river, but at least the merchandise would be set. The one time I remember the truck just made it and the bridge is collapsing behind the truck, and it got out, and then the next truck's going to sit there for 3 weeks. They build another bridge and do it all. That was Africa. And then you load the truck back up. I remember one truck just full of onions going to Bangui, and it just was forever, day after day after day after day, just driving, rain, and you're on the back of the truck lying on onions, crying and crying. When it rained, you just
sounds pretty miserable.
Stick your head out of this onion smell, and always right back there under that top. And I remember walking sometimes for 100 kilometres. I just walk, and sometimes stop in villages along the way and stay there. A lot of these villages, some of these kids had never seen a white man before. Very funny. And the chiefs were always quite hospitable, offering you one of their wives for the evening, knowing that to refuse would be an insult. Then what do you do in that predicament?
Indeed. What do you do, Malcolm?
You suddenly have a seizure, or you're very sick. And, it's quite a scary concept, but it doesn't work because she's invariably going to report back to him. And how was he? How was our guest last night? You kind of try and make a deal with her, so you can't plead the "sorry, I'm gay" card, because that just doesn't work in those
compute
that environment. So yeah, it was quite interesting.
I look forward to reading the book, Malcolm.
Cameroon, walking. I remember walking and turning around, seeing a truck come. Oh my God, a truck! I just can't believe it. This truck, you can hear it coming for like 10 kilometres away, and suddenly here it is, and it thumbs out, and it would be an overland truck, and they'd just drive straight past you. Wow, that
no
hurt.
way.
That used to hurt. The driver just look at you straight in the eye and just drive straight past you. Yeah. One white man to another walking along the... Although I probably wasn't white, I was probably sort of orangey.
Did you look
brown.
very scruffy?
Well, it's just, I just remember just finding a nice river and jumping in it and having a good wash. Eventually just getting to Cameroon, Yaoundé, catching up with stuff and travelling out into little places I'd want to go and see, then eventually heading south through Equatorial Guinea, Gabon, Congo.
Were you doing a lot of birding along the way? I mean, I can't imagine you had a pair of binoculars with you all this time.
I didn't have any binoculars. I used to miss it, and I didn't know really where I was. There was no books back then about, this is where to watch birds in Uganda, where to watch birds in Congo in 1984, 85.
How did you keep in contact with home? I mean, it's...
Post restant. Back then it was all... We got to a post office and hope... Sometimes you'd have a pile of letters, sometimes it'd be nothing. It'd be crushingly disappointing. Or like your Foreign, your girlfriends, your mum, sister, every friend's writing you a whole stack of letters, and you might get to a post office and try and call collect, and your mum or dad or sisters would answer, and it would be a chat a bit, and it was nice,
but unaffordable, really. It's not something you could do very often, was it, to call?
Well, there's no phones unless you're in a capital. You had to be in a capital city. Unless you were in Douala, Yaoundé or Bangui, not even in Libreville or...
It'd be nice to know a bit more about Uganda as a birding destination. What is so special, in your view, about Uganda?
Uganda is actually environmentally and geographically situated in a convergence zone. I think something like 75 of mainland Africa's phytochoria converge in Uganda, and as a result you've got a plethora of diverse habitats and biomes that all meet here like a raised island between the Albertine Rift and the Great Rift. It has affinities with the dry East African savanna systems and the tropical rainforests of the Central Congo Basin. It has affinities with the Guinea-Somal savanna system of the Sahel and the Guinea-Congolian savannas of like Queen Elizabeth, and then it has the Akagera Serengeti system which reaches into Lake Mburu in the south and around in Kenya into Kidepo, which is why you only find zebra in Kidepo and Lake Mburu. So it has all these sort of little patches that you find in parts of Uganda that are part of a greater system elsewhere, but they all converge in Uganda, and that's what makes it so rich. So if you wanted to just visit Africa and get the best of it, and you only had one opportunity to visit Africa, then visit Uganda, because for a country the size of the UK, it's got everything in it. A lot of what Africa's got to offer in one small country, basically. When I first tried to come to Uganda, the war was going on, and I'd entered Uganda from then, the nice, safe Zaire. How things have changed. I was with a convoy. We didn't get very far. We had to hightail it back into the then safe Zaire.
What year was this? Which
85, is it?
Ah, okay.
85, 86. When I think Museveni was closing in on, was it Obote? Yeah. A lot of fleeing troops and people. It was very stressful, tense times. And so I went through from Zaire into Rwanda, Burundi, Tanzania, driving with a couple of Somalis in a truck. Just drove all the way through Tanzania into Kenya, into Nairobi. So I missed out on Uganda then. After a lot of travelling, I eventually came back to the UK in 1991. Started thinking about life, other things. Let's find a job, go to school. And then I was at a party with my friends, and she said, "You must meet my friend Daniela, who's working in Uganda. She's doing a PhD there on banded mongoose." At the time I was a tree surgeon, I was a climber for a company in West London, thoroughly enjoying that kind of work, climbing trees and learning about silviculture and arboriculture. I really loved it. I was in a good place. But she sort of plucked on my heartstrings about Africa, and there was an opportunity. She said, come and help me. I need help in my project. I don't have anyone to really
And
help
what did
me.
you think that you'd be doing?
Just helping her with the data collection on banded mongoose, which is a Cambridge-based project that was run by a guy called Tim Clutton-Brock at the time. So I thought, the hell with this. I'd go away for 3 months and see what it was like. So I quit my job and I went out to Uganda, to Queen Elizabeth National Park. I stayed there. Then I said, well, somebody's doing mongoose, somebody's doing warthogs, somebody's doing lions. I said, who's doing any bird work here? Of course, I was still very much into my birds, and bird ringing was a big thing for me at that time. And I was very excited suddenly to be in Uganda, and there's birds were everywhere. I remember the first day I got to Uganda, I stayed at Claire Infield's house in
a friend of ours.
Yeah, in
Makindye.
Makindye. So I stayed at Claire's house on the veranda, just whilst Daniela was out and about in Kampala getting stuff and provisions to go to Queen Elizabeth the next day. And I remember amassing an incredible bird list from that veranda. Absolutely incredible, just with my binoculars watching all these.
They still got great birds. I stayed there last week.
Really?
Yeah.
Amazing. Let's greet Claire for me.
Yeah.
I haven't seen her for years. Amazing. And set off to Queen Elizabeth National Park. And when I got there, I spoke to a guy called Henry Basulwa. Wonderful chap, absolutely first class chap. And I said, who's doing any bird work here in Uganda? I mean, there's so much potential to do some ringing studies, to look at inventories, look at migration. Nothing was being done. I'd love to come back here and do some bird work, like ringing, and make a list for the park. Just simple stuff, just to kick it off, because there's absolutely nothing. I mean, the bird list for Queen Elizabeth back then was something like 450 something. It was a big list, but it was
2/3 of what it is now.
When I got there, I started collecting, and long story short, I just thought I need to come back here. And so I put together with some friends and formed a little group called, the first name for it was the Mwea Ringing Association. Then later Derek Pomeroy said, why don't you call it the Queen Elizabeth National Park Bird Observatory, which we did. And that sort of became a logo for our project. And through friends, Barry Williams, Chris Sharp, Billy Rutherford, Aaron Sapsford, a lot of others, Brian Manton, the late Johnny Thatcher. Lots of people over the years helped to come out and help with ringing birds. It would be waders at Lake Catway, rainforest in Maramagumbo, savannas, the yellow wagtails, Palearctic migrants, birds of prey in the craters. We used to catch wildbirds, jackal, auger buzzards, all sorts of things, snake eagles. It was just absolute heaven for a bird ringer's paradise. But we were collecting this data and making lists and getting birds on the map of Uganda and Queen Elizabeth. And I was just running around, a bit directionless at the time, no funding. It's all self-funded. And Henry Basulwa said...
Was he with an organisation?
He was the head of the Uganda Institute for Tropical Ecology, is that right? There was a little unit within UA. And I got the letter from him that invited me to Queen Elizabeth. And that's what made it happen for me, because then I didn't have to apply for a research grant and pay research fees. Because I had this letter from Uganda Institute of Ecology. Was a big thorn in the backside for a lot of the chief park wardens. Never Latif, bless him. Latif was a wonderful chief park warden, a legend. But there were some other people who were quite unpleasant and just wanted money, didn't want people like me. But I had this letter from Henry. So I was able to stay there indefinitely in Queen Elizabeth National Park, which gave me the time to do all this work without the stress of having to find research fees and research permits and things like that. Over those years I managed to increase the bird list, and where it is now well over 600 species for Queen Elizabeth National Park. A lot of that was through mist netting.
You were on the peninsula, weren't you?
Mm.
Right in the heart.
I was at Moya, and I had eventually got a house, and then the UTB came to me, Uganda Tourism Board. A guy called Sean Mann, who was working then as one of the directors, said, "Hey, we heard about you. We've heard you're a bit nuts, but you know your birds in Uganda." Yeah, that sounds about right. Would you be interested in heading up a nationwide bird guide training program that the EU want to fund and put together? Sounds like a plan. I said, yes, it's something that's very much needed. So with some money, long story short, we ended up planning the first ever bird guide training workshop. I put together with all the content about what bird guides needed to learn in order to be good bird guides. And the first course was held at the Uganda Wildlife Education Centre. I think it was the zoo back then. And we had the first class involved some of the senior Ugandan tour operators today, birding, Johnny Kamagisha, Mitevi Hassan, Herbert Birahanga, Mahdi, a lot of guys back then who are still going strong today. We started that, and then I led the UTB delegation to the British Birdwatching Fair with Sean.
Yeah, so that was the first time that Uganda was represented at the bird fair.
I think Boniface was the first guy to make contact with the bird fair, and he went there and got a stand, and he said, "Hey UTB, you need to get your asses over here to the British Birdwatching Fair." And then we had Tim Appleton come out to Uganda, and I took him around Uganda.
Oh yes, Tim's lovely. You met him.
That was in 98, 97. We went back again in consecutive years, growing and growing the birding thing, and growing more and more workshops. I then I got a Land Rover, a UTB Land Rover, and we'd drive around the country teaching these workshops in national parks, in community run areas, nature reserves, all sorts of places, and exploring at the same time. And then that's when John Rousseau, Adam Riley and Marco Sacchi came out to do the Where to Watch Birds in Uganda book, and we went and got all the content, researched all that. Amazing times. And from that initiative that was funded by the EU, I put together this bird guide training manual. I taught that for a long time around the country in all the different national parks. And from then, in the sort of late 90s, it just took off. And the credit must go to the Ugandans, absolutely, for running with it. Because a lot of places you go, it's like, can't see the point, it's too much effort. But they really got it. They absolutely got it. They went, no, this we need. And now, if you take it to where we have Sunbird Hill has championed the village bird clubs, it's an absolutely massive conservation victory in my book. For the relatively little amount it's cost to get these clubs up and running, you can drive around here in the middle of nowhere and suddenly see 5 or 6 youngsters all working out what bird this is. Half of them will have binoculars, half won't, but they'll all have their pens and notebooks to hand. Budding bird watchers, all passionate about learning the birds in this area. And that to me is just the most spectacular bit of conservation work ever.
Oh, the local kids love so the first village bird club is here at Chabakwere village, and Julia said that they started off with, I don't know, a dozen or 20 something kids, and soon there were 35, and they got so into it they were making all their own rules, like you mustn't litter, you mustn't
the
pick
penalties
up birds
for
age.
littering.
But they were getting so serious about it. It was like, we're not just going to do it on the Sunday morning bird club, we had to take these rules home as well. So
no,
it really
it's
seems to have
just
taken
unique
off.
and I don't know where else it's happened. But what you have today is bird watching in Uganda isn't just what's that? It's actually almost a household name now, bird watching, and it's fantastic. It's saved so many habitats, so many individual birds. People are learning. Young people are telling their parents and their grandparents that you can't just kill these birds or put poison out or do this or do that. So we have to be responsible for the environment, and that's what's happening now, thanks to these sorts of initiatives. But I just feel so proud of all the young kids that I work with who are now up and running with their own companies, and many a time I've hired them when I've come back and done safaris here. I'll hire my ex-students to run the safari for me.
That's amazing.
And it really is. The pupil now is taking the teacher around with his tourists.
And I think we should give a shout out to African Bird Club for supporting the Village Bird Club concept. I think Julia Lloyd, our mutual friend, I think it was her concept, the Village Bird Club, and there's a number of them now around here, aren't there?
Our mutual friend Richard Charles, before he was the chairman of the ABC, was my friend and a fellow ringer, came here to Sunbird Hill.
Yes, thank you. You brought him here.
12, 15 years ago, and had a wonderful experience catching and ringing Afrotropical birds at Sunbird Hill, before it was Sunbird Hill. And it stuck in his mind, and we always said, hey, think about this, and Julia kept in touch with the three of us, have always pushed for something to happen here, and Julia finally came up with this Village Bird Club's concept, and Richard was more than delighted to give it his full support, because he knew exactly where it was coming from, because he'd been here. That's just a success story.
You've been doing a lot of training while you've been here on this trip. I know you've got visitors with you and you're having a lot of fun, and they're learning a lot from you and contributing to scientific monitoring at the same time. But you've also been, I don't know, there's 5 or 6 guides come naturalists here that they're like sponges sucking up every bit of information you've been sharing.
They're very keen. One of the things I used to tell people is you can have a hobby. It costs you nothing, just your time, passion to learn. Walk out your front door, go down to a wetland, and you don't even need binoculars, just to go and look and see what birds and try and work out which ones are which. And it starts there. And that has now turned into a career for a lot of these guys. I remember some of these guys who were just little kids in shorts and ragged t-shirts and snot running down their noses. Now they're just picking me up in a Land Cruiser at the airport and taking me round Uganda. It's fantastic, proper conservation, and they've done it all themselves. It's all about them.
Well, thank you, Malcolm. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed hearing more about your life in Uganda and across the whole of Africa. And we didn't quite get around to the famous buffalo story, but maybe we have another conversation on the podcast another day.
Time, painful memories. There are some sacrifices you have to go through in order to get to this, and some of them are running into disgruntled old gentlemen in the bush when you're trying to go bird ringing.
What an extraordinary life Malcolm has led, and he's still out there leading tours and ringing. His pride in the people that he's trained in Uganda specifically over the years is palpable, isn't it? And I've met many of the people who were young trainees back in the day and who are running really successful birding tours now. And I've watched Malcolm train young people in Uganda, specifically at Sunbird Hill, and it's a real honour to be able to pick up a tiny little bit of knowledge myself as well. If you're planning a trip to Uganda or anywhere in East Africa, or you're passionate about birding, get in touch. I know some really cool people who are experts in their fields. If there's any aspect of today's podcast episode that you enjoyed, that you want to follow up with, just send me a message. You've been listening to the East Africa Travel Podcast with me, Charlotte Beauvoisin, author of Diary of a Mzungu. Thanks for listening. Ribale Mononga. For detailed transcripts with all the correct spellings of all the people mentioned, the organisations and the places, go to eastafricatravelpodcast.com. We spend a lot of time making sure that we have correct transcripts for everything that we produce, but unfortunately Apple and Spotify, for example, ignore those and generate their own transcripts. It does mean that sometimes you might read along and find something that you can't understand. It looks like a load of gobbledygook. But rest assured, if you go to my blog, Diary of a Mzungu, or you go to eastafricatravelpodcast.com, you can find all the transcripts with all the correct names of all the interesting people and places that get mentioned, not just on this episode, but on all the episodes that we've recorded so far. Tune in every week to the award-winning East Africa travel podcast, the dawn chorus of a tropical rainforest, gorilla tracking adventures, coming up soon, and the sound of waves lapping on an Indian Ocean beach. Join me on my morning nature walks and listen to illuminating chats with cool people doing awesome stuff to protect our planet. Thanks for listening. See you next week.